Rekeying mortise cylinders. This is a mortise cylinder. They're often used with mortise locks, hence the name, but not always. Stuff like key override switches, certain exit device trim also utilize mortise cylinders. They're easy to identify, namely right here, because of the threads on the back. In the case of key override switches or exit device trim, you've got a castle nut that'll screw on to the back to hold the cylinder in place in whatever device is being used. In mortise locks, it physically screws into the lock and then it's held in place with a set screw that goes either on this channel or this channel right here. It's not handed, so it can go left or right hand door, doesn't matter. They utilize cams, which is this silver piece right here. This is actually a Schlage L9000 cam, but they're not cam locks, in that cam locks rely on the cam to physically lock and unlock, something like a cabinet door. In this case, the cam is nothing more than an interface between the key and the lock. So it transmits the motion, from the key turning, and that carries on into the lock and pulls back a lever, latch, throws a bolt, whatever it may be. But that's the purpose of the cam. To disassemble these, got to first start by removing the cam. Would have helped if I had the tools already pulled out, but shows how unprepared I am. So first things first, we got to get the cam off. Modern day, I know the Schlage modulars use the torque screws. If not, if it's something like LSDA or an older Schlage, this is an original conventional, they use Phillips head. Older ones will use a combination of Phillips head and standard tip, which are a pain in the butt, but I digress. So once we've got the cam removed, the next step is to rotate this plug, which will allow us to remove it from the rest of the mortise cylinder. Now there's a number of different ways you can do this. Easiest way, fastest way is to use the key, which we have right here. So we rotate it, we can pull it out from here. But I understand that's not always the case. You may not have a key. Key may have been lost. Another option without the key is to shim it open. I've got a video about that. If you want to search through about how to shim cylinders, there's that option. You can pick them, but you have to be careful because once the cam's removed, there's nothing holding this plug in place beyond the pins. So once you get it to the shear line, there's a potential, depending on what kind of pick you're using and where it is, when you pull out or when you move that last set, the plug can come with it and potentially lock things up. Or at least send pins flying. You could bump it. I don't like bumping because it's going to scratch up this face right about here where it hits. And besides, there's far faster, easier ways to do it than bumping. And then finally, the slide cover at top, you can remove that. I like with the slide cover removed, you can dump everything out. Springs, top pins, bottom pins, you just dump it over, knock it out a few times. I prefer shimming. If I don't have a key, I rarely pick and definitely don't bump. But if none of those options are working, this will come off last. It just takes a little bit longer than shimming and picking, but it's a last resort. Good thing about these slide covers are soft brass, so not hard to take out. You can, bend them back into shape if you mess up, if they get warped or, whatever happens to them. It's really easy to get them back into place, and then you can just get it started and lightly tap it back in with a hammer and then start over from scratch. But those are your options to disassemble this. But let's assume we have a key, because we do, and we're going to make this really quick. First thing you do, insert your key, turn it 90 degrees. Now we're ready to pull it out because nothing is holding it in place anymore. So from here, we're going to use a follower to push her out. The important thing to notice about mortise cylinders, especially the plugs, they've got a notch right here that's going to interface with the cam. So we can't just, I can't push it like that. Let me find a better one. Prove a point. Yeah, so I can't push it like that because see, there's going to be that gap there. It's no good. Pins are going to fall through. So with these, you're going to have one with a cutout notch. You're also going to have the right diameter because these all aren't the same diameter. You know, this is half an inch. Some are 0.509, 0.556, whatever it may be. So you push it out with the follower. You want to make sure that you're maintaining contact the entire time. You're letting the follower do the work. You want to hold on to both sides of it, obviously, but see how I'm moving the follower, or pushing the follower. And that's how you want to do it. Once we're out, go ahead and put that to the side. We've got to get rid of these old pins. And now we're ready to start. Ready to start rekeying. So you can either pin this up first, or you can pin the plug up first, or check the top pins. You're going to have to do both. It doesn't matter which order you do it in. There's a video, or I have made a video about checking the Bible of a cylinder. That's basically what this is called. The top part, top springs, make sure everything's where it should be. You know, the right springs, top pins, all that being used. But doesn't matter which order you do it. I'm not going to check that right now, just to keep this short as possible. So now that we've got the key, in this case, the direct code is stamped there. It looks like what? 59859. Okay, that's going to tell me the pins I got to use. Or actually, no, that's the old key. We got to go to the new key. The new key also, too, has the direct biddings on it. In this case, 45246. So we've got to pin up to those codes, and that's really easy to do. What happens when you don't? Let's just say you've got a key with no direct bidding on it, or it's a duplicate of something else that they handed you and said, oh, I want it to match this, okay? Well, there's a few ways you can do it. You can decode it with a decoder. You can use something like calipers or a micrometer to take the physical measurements, compare it with like the key bidding specification. That'll tell you what it is. Pretty simple to just start, you know, kind of eyeing things, you know, that's a 4. I know that because of the bidding, but, you know, hey, let me throw in a 210. Oh, no, that's a little too low. All right, let me go up one. 225. Oh, yeah, that's it. Okay. So you just kind of eyeball it as you go along. But when setting up brand new, I always like to save these factory keys that come with every cylinder you get. If you order at that option, that way you've got what we call setup keys for the future. And there's no guesswork. But so we got the code here, 45246. I'll just grab them because I'm all memorized, but 4, 5, 2. Now I use my fingers. A lot of people use tweezers. It slows me down. I don't use those anymore. Not for pinning the plug, at least. Okay, so there we are, 45246. Around this time's good idea to, you know, take a look over. And that's why I kept the key in here while I was pinning. It kind of gives me a visual indication that everything's well. Wrong pin wasn't dropped in the wrong slot. You know, making sure it's going to turn, because this plug diameter should carry over hypothetically along the whole length of it. That's why there's some chamfering to these pins here. We want to make sure that it's as smooth, or as reasonably smooth as possible at the top as you feel right here. That way, you know, you won't get any clipping or rubbing when you put it back together. But we look good, so we're ready to proceed. And before we were pushing the plug follower, now we're going to push with the plug. And what I like to do is I like to orient it in a way that the pins are staying perpendicular to the ground, so there's no risk of me like turning or something and dropping pins or whatnot. So what I'll do is push with the plug follower, put it in place, remove the plug follower, don't need that anymore. And then I'll turn it back and forth a few times saying, oh, okay, we're good. It's not locking up. I don't, you know, nothing out of the ordinary. Next step, we got to remove the key, but because we don't have the cam on the back, if I were to pull this, see, it's going to come out. No bueno. What I'll do is I'll put my thumb here and pull while pressing against my index finger. One more time, push. You can do it with thumb first. Doesn't matter. But now that that's out, we're safe. So, again, I should have been more prepared because I don't know where my lubricant is. Well, I've got fluid film, which is pretty good, I guess. Not the best for this because it is very thick. So what I'll do after removing my key, I'm going to lubricate it. And I like to hold mine upside down. That way when I spray, it's going to get coated, and hopefully gravity is going to help some of that lubricant go down into the springs, top pins, around the plug itself. Ideally, you want it everywhere. There's no such thing as too much lubrication or in a bad spot with a mortise cylinder. So let's just imagine I lubricated it, 2 or 3 shots of it, whatever lubricant you use. You'll put the key back in. Oh, that's the old key. And then after it's lubricated, I'll put the key back in, and then I'll turn, pretty much 180 degrees each way to really work it in. After that, take the key back out. We're good to go. We can put the cam back on. Now, as far as rekeying these, not a lot can go wrong. If you lock up your cylinder or if something went wrong during disassembly, like I said, worst case, you can always shim it. If, the key doesn't work or you messed up with the pinning, if you lock it up, you can pull that slide cover off and start over from scratch. Can't really brick these, render them useless. And then from here, as I got the cam back on, I want to make sure it's still turning pretty smooth. Because what happens, on some of these, especially the 2-piece ones that Medico makes, if that thing's not seated just right, what happens, it'll be like perfectly turning right here. But once you go like 90 degrees or, 110 degrees, something like that, you'll feel it start to bind a little bit. Easiest way to fix that, got a hammer. Hammer's best, but screwdriver will work too. Find the spot it's binding. Let's say it's binding right here. I'm just going to hit it a few times, and that should seat it properly and help you out there. Other than that, what you'll encounter sometimes, these threads will be stripped. Whoever put them in, cross-threaded it, these will be, damaged. They make a tool to fix that. No problem there, but that's kind of beyond the scope of this video. But it's how simple it is to rekey a mortise cylinder. So there it is.